This is the 3.1 functions video. Today in class I showed you this song and I told you that you would be listening to it again just to help you remember the definition of a function. So that is how we are going to start this video. Please enjoy.
Student, pick yourself off the ground. I said student, cause you're in a new unit, there's no need to be unhappy. Yeah, student, there's some things you should know. I said student, when your grades are real low, you can sing this in. I'm sure you will find many things will come to your mind. A function is an x equals 1y. A function is an x equals 1y. They have every x with only one y. You can remember if you try. Yeah, a function is an x equals 1y. A function is an x equals 1y. You can get yourself an A. You can have a good year. You can give your parents a thrill. Domain input, x values you have. I said domain input, x values you have. I said domain input, x values you have. But you got to know this one thing. Range output, y values you find. I said range output, y values you find. Range output, y values you find. I'm sure you can get this today. Yeah, a function is an x equals 1y. A function is an x equals 1y. They have every x with only one y. You can remember if you try. Yeah, a function is an x equals 1y. A function is an x equals 1y. You can get yourself an A. You can have a good year. You can give your parents a thrill. A function is an x equals 1y. A function is an x equals 1y. Domain input, x values you have. And range output, y values you find. A function is an x equals 1y. A function is an x equals 1y. Domain input, x values you have. And range output, y values you find.
Okay, so we are going to move into our notes. Hopefully this song will help you remember the definition of what a function is, and we will review that now. So these are the notes that we took in class. All I've done is inserted a screenshot, and I've actually filled in the things that we talked about in class. So if you look right here, it asks, how can you tell if a relation is a function? So remember today we talked about relations. Those are just a relationship that are, usually expressed between x and y in algebra. So as the song just said, a function is an x paired with one y. So that means each input, or x value, is paired with one output, or y value. So no x value can repeat with a different y value. Okay? So we looked at several different representation of functions. We looked at ordered pairs, we looked at table of values, mapping diagrams, equations, and graphs. So we're going to kind of review these three together because they're very similar in the way that they're organized. So if you look at the ordered pairs right here, what you want to do is identify your x and y values first. So that's what I'm going to do here. So I noticed that for A, and if you want, you can kind of organize this in a table if it makes it a little bit easier for you. Remember, ordered pairs are written x, comma, y. So for A, we have -2 paired with +2. We have -1 paired with +2. We have 0 paired with 2. We have 1 paired with 0. And we have 2 paired with 0. So if you go back to your definition, the question is, do any of the x values repeat with two different y values? Well, in this case, none of my x values repeat. I have -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. And so since none of these repeat, this part is kind of ancillary. We don't really need to see, it doesn't matter that the y's repeat. We care, do any x values repeat with different y's? And since these do not, then this would be considered a function. Okay? It's a function if none of the x values repeat with different y's. Okay, so why don't you pause and do B and see if you can do that one on your own, then restart. Okay, so if you look at letter B, the first thing that I did is I went ahead and made me a little table, a T-chart, just to help me organize my work. So I noticed whenever I listed all my x's paired with the y's, that right here 4 was paired with 0, and then right here 4 is paired with 3. Since I had an x value that repeated with two different y values, this is not a function. Okay? All right, so C is already kind of set up a little bit easier for us. So I'm looking at my x values. I have -2, -1, 0, 0, 1, 2. So as soon as I see this 0, 0 right here, that's what I'm going to key in on because I have some x values repeating. They are also repeating with two different y values. So because of that, this would not be a function. No x values can repeat with two different y values. Okay, so that is not a function. Okay, our mapping diagram is similar to a table. Notice we have these little pods. The ones on the left where the arrows originate are your input values, which are your x values, and the one where the arrows are pointing are your y values, or your output. So in this case, -1, 3, and 11 are my x values. None of them repeat. It doesn't matter that 3 and 11 share a y value. As long as none of the x values repeat with different y's, it would be a function. So this one is a function according to our definition. Okay? This first section is really about vocabulary, so it's important that you understand that a function is a relation where each x is paired with one y value. They cannot repeat with different y's. When we worked on our equations, I showed you guys how to enter an equation into your graphing calculator and then view the table of values. And that way we can use the same process that we used on the last page. So what I'm doing right now is I am looking at letter A. It says y equals 5x. So I go to y equals on my calculator and I enter 5x. Then I'm going to press second graph, which will allow me to look at my table of values. And that's what we wrote right here, just to remind you how to actually use your graphing calculator. So for A, they want us to look at the inputs 1, 2, and 3. So on my calculator, I would scroll up to 1, 2, and 3. And in my calculator, for letter A, 1 is paired with 5, 2 is paired with 10, and 3 is paired with 15. So according to our rule, none of our x values repeat with different y values, so therefore this would be considered a function. Okay? All right, for B it's a little bit trickier because our calculator is set up as y equals. So we talked about the fact, well, this equation right here, x equals y squared, could be rewritten where it's y equals a number. So this is why we did literal equations. This is why we solved for different variables. So the opposite of squaring y would be to take the square root. So if I took the square root of this equation, that square would be removed and it would be written as the square root of x is equal to y. This allows me to use my graphing calculator because now it's in y equals. So remember, you press second and the x squared button in order to get your square root. Then you press the button right next to alpha that says xton. You press that to get your x. And then same thing, hit second graph to look at your table of values. So now let's go ahead and look at our table of values here. So they're asking us to do x as 0. So 0 is paired with 0. And 1 is paired with 1. Since none of our x values repeat with different y values, letter B would also be considered a function. Okay? The last thing we talked about today was the vertical line test. And we talked about the fact that we use the vertical line test when we're looking at graphs. It's just a quick way for us to see if a graph represents a function. So I can't lay my pencil here on my screen, but what I can do is I can use a different laser pointer. So I am going to use this lightsaber as my pencil. So in order to do the vertical line test, you lay your pencil on your paper and you want to roll it vertically, so you're rolling it across your graph. Notice right here, I'm touching 2 points at the same time. If I continue moving across my graph, I wind up touching 2 points again at this point. Okay? So you're rolling your pencil across your graph. If it touches 2 points at the same time, then it fails the vertical line test and therefore is not a function. Okay? So when I touched these 2 points and I touched these 2 points at the same time, that made this graph fail the vertical line test, and therefore this would not be a function. Okay? The only way that you're able to touch 2 points at the same time is if they had the same x value paired with 2 different y's, and that's why this fails the vertical line test and is not a function. On the second one, when I put my pencil on my graph and I roll it across, I notice I'm only touching the graph at 1 point the entire way. So that means it passes the vertical line test, which would make this one a function. And remember, we're moving on to linear functions. So just so you know, this is a linear function because it graphs as a straight line. Okay, if you guys have any questions or you need any help, please come in for tutoring, and I hope y'all have a great night.